Okay, so this is the second part of the PowerPoint notes or the lecture. Um, like I said, we're leaving off here. This is a map of Europe during World War II and the Holocaust. I tried being able to zoom in while filming this for you guys. If I try to zoom in, it doesn't really work too well. It kind of makes it more confusing. But if you look carefully, and you can pause this if you want when I'm done explaining it to kind of zoom in or try to take a look. If you look, the black boxes with the little white in them, these were extermination camps. If you take a look at the little black dots, okay, these, and there's a lot of them, these were all concentration camps that people were being sent to, mostly Jews were being sent to. The little yellow circles with the red, so if you see red with yellow, these were all the ghettos that Jewish people were forced to live in. Sometimes before they were sent to the concentration camps, they were moved to the ghetto and then moved to the concentration camps. Um, and if you see this little outline, it's a skull and bones. You can see them all along here. There's some here, up in this area. These were places of major massacre. So these were places where many, many, many people died, were killed. Okay, so that is a map of Europe during the Holocaust, and then this is an example of a chart that helped Nazis determine who was German and who was not, and people had to carry proof around with them. They could be asked at any time to show proof that they were German. Okay, so here are some more pictures. The top left picture is what appears to be a Jewish synagogue in Warsaw, the Warsaw Ghetto, and it looks like there's smoke on it. It looks like it's on fire. On the right is a picture taken at Auschwitz death camp, and then the bottom two pictures are pictures of Jewish prisoners being taken to camps. This one looks like they're already in the camp, and this one looks like they are being forced to board a train to go to the camp. Okay, and here are more pictures that were taken in the concentration camp. Like I said, they're pretty graphic. These look like clothing or bodies. This looks like bodies in a ditch and someone else being forced in. Looks like a man, but it's hard to tell. Here are pictures of, looks like men in the camp. As you can see, they're very emaciated, very thin. They weren't being fed properly in the camp, so you can tell how skinny they are here. And then another picture here in the camp. And one thing that people often ask is why the Jewish people let this happen. And you have to remember, number one, they were afraid. Number two, this is so horrific. People heard rumors of what was going on, but because it's so terrible, they didn't actually believe that that's what was happening here. The Nazi Party kept it quiet. They didn't want people to know what was going on, so they were just rumors. So Jewish people didn't think this was really happening. They thought that if they cooperated with the Nazi Party, if they cooperated with the Germans, then eventually they would be allowed to go home. So that's why at first they were not resisting and they were cooperating with what the Germans wanted. They thought that they would show them that they were good citizens and they would be able to go back home. In saying that, there were different types of resistance. There were people that were resisting the Nazi Party. They did oppose the Nazi Party in their beliefs. These people were obviously brave enough to participate in different things such as physical acts of revolt, people would smuggle messages, food, weapons, and other necessities to prisoners inside the camp and ghettos. Just practicing religious and cultural traditions in defiance of rules established by Nazis was a way of resisting the Nazi Party. Creating fine art, music, and poetry inside the ghettos and concentration camps was also another form of resistance and rebellion. Okay, so why did it take so long for the U.S. to get involved? At the time, the U.S. had a really strong anti-involvement policy. We wanted to just keep to ourselves and let everyone else solve their own problems. Again, nobody knew for sure what was really going on in Germany and in Europe with the Holocaust. The U.S. also wasn't located anywhere near where all of this was taking place, so there was this feeling of distance. The U.S. was trying to cope with the Great Depression on our end over here in America. And again, reports of what was happening over in Europe was not generally printed in the U.S. press, so Americans had very little idea of what was happening in Europe. But we did eventually get involved, as mentioned before, when Japan and Axis power bombed Pearl Harbor. That is when the United States decided to step in and become involved in the war. Okay, so Germany surrendered eventually on May 9th, 1945. That ended the war in Europe, and then Japan surrendered on September 2nd, 1945, so several months later, which ended the war in the Pacific. In total, World War II resulted in 55 million deaths worldwide. The aftermath of World War II. In 1945, when Allied troops entered the concentration camps, they discovered piles of bones and ashes, which was evidence of the millions of people that were murdered. So this made it really hard for Nazis and Germans to deny what was going on because there was evidence that was found. Soldiers also found thousands of survivors suffering from starvation and disease. And after liberation, so after being freed, many survivors had no home to return to, and some that did actually refused to return to their former home because of the racism that still persisted in many parts of Europe. So just because the war was over didn't necessarily mean that the racism was over. So some of these people did not return home once they were rescued. There were many displaced persons, and different camps were set up for these homeless survivors. Okay, and many organizations were created to offer relief and help to these survivors. Many immigrated out of Europe, and some countries are still struggling to rebuild their country after the devastation of World War II. Okay, so that's the last bit of the slide. I can tell you that in Germany, many Germans were ashamed and still are ashamed of what happened. They weren't teaching about the Holocaust in German schools because they were embarrassed by what happened. Now it is illegal if they don't. So they are required by law to teach students about the Holocaust. But this is just some basic information for you to have as we get ready to start reading the Diary of Anne Frank, the play version. So this will hopefully have given you an idea of the world that Anne Frank and her family lived in and why they decided to go into hiding.